ToolCASE, the retail banking industry's preferred choice for real-time risk management and fraud detection.
Hey, this is your host, Sam Piccolotti with the ToolCASE FraudCAST, and my co-host today, as you guys know, often referred to as the godfather of the dark web, Mr. Brett Johnson. Many know, but Brett Johnson was responsible for refining the modern financial cybercrime as we know it today after being placed on the United States most wanted list, captured, convicted of 39 felonies. Brett promptly escaped prison, captured again. Brett served his time, accepted responsibility, and found redemption through his loved ones and the help of the FBI. That's right, with the help of the FBI. Today, he's considered a leading authority on the internet crime and identity theft, cybersecurity. Brett speaks, consults across the planet to help protect people, organizations from the type of person he used to be. But we are glad that he's the person he is today. If you want to reach Brett, you can get him at Gollum, Gollum, at anglerfish.com. That's anglerphish.com. Brett, we got a great guest
Sam,
today.
I appreciate it. You know what? I'm doing all right today. I was going to say, sorry to try to interrupt you. I was going to say that it turns out that when you stop breaking the law enforcement gets pretty friendly.
How about that?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? That's right. Hey, I know you're excited, as I am, to introduce our guest today, Mr. Brian Smith. Brian, the established member of the Redstone Federal Credit Union's management team. Brian has had the honor of serving members of Redstone Federal Credit Union for 16 years. Currently, as the manager of security and investigations, Brian proactively leads a dream team, may I say, focused on preserving the safety and soundness of member and credit union assets through the effective fraud and risk mitigation strategies, which we're going to talk about today. Areas under his leadership are fraud analytics, fraud investigations, fraud specialist, chargeback specialist, that's debit card fraud and disputes, and physical security team. Brian has served in the management of Redstone for over 13 years. We should also mention that Brian serves on the executive board of directors of the Huntsville Area Crime Stoppers, current InfraGard member, FBI partnership with private sector business executives, current FBI CAAA member, active ASIS international member, and has served as a deputy sheriff for the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department. Brett, you sure you want to talk to this guy?
You know what? I'm getting a little scared, a little antsy, a little nervous. You know,
he's running away from scarier people than me.
That's right. You know, Redstone. What else can you say? I mean, Redstone is a fantastic credit union. It's a great business up there. I mean, it's you guys do things right. You guys do things right, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking to you today, Brian.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for saying that.
Super partner on the ToolCASE team as well, and Brian's got some really interesting stuff to share with us today. We want to get into some dialogue, talk about crime stopping, and maybe a recent incident that he can share, and how he has captured one of those bad actors. But Brian, welcome, pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining.
Good to be here. Good to be here. We always love to talk about success stories, right?
We do, and you know, we don't always get the bad guy, but in this story, we get to talk about getting the bad guy.
Absolutely. We got one.
We got one. That's right. More on the radar. Brian, you know,
He'll tell his friends and they'll leave us alone.
You know, and that's an important topic. You want to get the target off your back, right?
Right.
Let's talk a little bit before we dive into that incident. I want to ask you a little bit about you know, some of your other work here with the FBI. You know, I rattled off a long acronym of FBI CAAA, but I don't know what that is. Do you want to talk to us about that for a minute?
Oh, I'd love to. That's one of my favorite topics. So that acronym stands for the FBI Citizens Academy Alumni Association. So I had the honor to be nominated spring of 2019. Just to get nominated for that group is a huge honor. They only take a select few applicants, and it's a 9-week program. You have to dedicate 9 weeks of your life to that, but you get to learn all about our FBI Birmingham field office and also their office here in Huntsville. You get to learn about their efforts in keeping the community and the state and the nation safe. You get to kind of be somewhat included in their inner circle, as they say, and got to meet Special Agent in Charge Johnny Sharp Jr. out of the Birmingham field office. And now I carry on to be a public ambassador for the FBI in the private sector. And so that's what the FBIC AAA is all about.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure it's a big benefit to the Redstone Group to have that level of expertise and experience in conjunction with your other work. So very cool. I wanted to dive into an incident that you shared. You know, I should probably let the listeners know that Redstone Federal Credit Union, a client of ToolCASE, you guys run a real-time analytics solution that we distribute called Informant, rather sophisticated real-time analytics piece, incorporates RembrandtAI or Rembrandt artificial intelligence component to it. And we've been partnered for years, but just recently, you guys were able to share some details of an incident that occurred and how our system was affected. But I want to walk listeners through, if you would, the process that you went through, because this type of criminal activity is predominant throughout the industry. I think consumers and both clients, if they happen to be financial institutions, banks, credit unions as well, have all experienced this type of thing. But you guys got on the front side of this. You want to walk us through that story?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and it's unique. So thank you for the opportunity. And without the technology through ToolCASE, we would not have had a successful ending. So let me tell you a little bit about it. We started noticing local PIN-based ATM fraud right here in our backyard, and that is somewhat abnormal. Card fraud is not abnormal, but for us in our fraud trends, at least today, of course, fraud trends change daily, but typically we do not see local PIN-based fraud trends at ATMs here in our backyard. And so it hit the radar pretty quick. Also, it was interesting because they were hitting the same dollar amount at the same handful of ATMs. And so a trend emerged pretty quick, as you can imagine. You know, not to get too specific, but they were hitting us for $484 every time. Unless the person's account that they were trying to use had less than that, then they would just take whatever they had. Right? They weren't picky. They take $50 if they had to.
Let me ask you about that strategy. 44. Are they trying to avoid some type of minimum? Is that or maximum?
Yeah. The maximum ATM daily withdrawal limit is $500. So they knew
get
they
as
had
close
to,
as they can get to it.
Right. And they knew they had to allow a little bit because they needed to do an ATM inquiry, and that has a small fee associated with it when you go to a foreign ATM and check your balance. So they knew they needed to get as close to 500 as they could without going over. So sounds like a guessing game we used to play when I was a kid. But anyway, this trend started to emerge. It started hitting us in mid-March. And you can tell when you start diving into the accounts affected that these victims were truly victims. Anytime we see PIN-based fraud claims, it makes us kind of raise an eyebrow, right? Because you're like, okay, how did they know your PIN? Is typically our first question. But these individuals, their story was all the same. Most of them were longtime members with us, and it just did not make sense. And so we started partnering with our local law enforcement partners, and of course, that kind of happened simultaneously because as these people were victims, they were then doing what? They were going down to the local law enforcement agency and filing police reports. And so local law enforcement agency calls us. They're like, hey, Redstone, what's going on? And we're like, hey, so glad you called. What's going on? And so we collaborate together and we start tracking this. The problem was at the time, we had not dialed in a real-time alert to trigger off the activity. We knew we could. We knew we had a partner in ToolCASE that could do that. And so as these transactions started carrying on, we started putting together some commonalities. All of these transactions were all these transactions began rather with a balance inquiry, right? Well, I don't know about you, but I typically don't do a balance inquiry when I go to the ATM. I typically know what I have. And all of these ATMs were at non-EMV compatible ATM machines. And what I mean by that is Redstone Federal Credit Union's ATMs and ITMs, they are exclusively EMV chip read transactions. And what that means to the average viewer that may not know what that acronym stands for, that is the little security chip that you see on your card. It generates a real-time unique basically passcode, if you will. It generates a real-time unique approval through that chip code every time that it's read. And if EMV is enabled on the ATM, it makes it harder for the bad guys to counterfeit your card. They can counterfeit your card, but it's going to get declined because it doesn't have that chip in the card. Well, the bad guys in this case, they were going to ATMs where that was not enforced. So I'm not saying these ATMs did not have that feature. That it's just the financial institution over those ATMs did not have that enforced, meaning it would not decline the transaction if it didn't get a chip read. Okay, that's something else that stood out to us really quick. And like I said, they were using the same handful of ATMs, so we were able to get a geographical, if you will, range of where all this activity was occurring. Something that is not unique in fraudulent ATM activity is the fraudsters were not driving up to the ATM, they were walking up. And of course, they do that so the ATM cameras don't get a vehicle description. It helps eliminate a tag, capture of a tag in video. And so local law enforcement, they basically, and with COVID, everybody's wearing a mask, right? So all they really had was an individual with a mask and a hat at an ATM. So we worked together. Local law enforcement actually set up an overview camera so they could get a better view. This went on for a few weeks. We reached out to ToolCASE. We shared with our contacts at ToolCASE, hey, here's what we know. We know they're going to do an inquiry before the transaction. We know they're going to use a non-Redstone ATM. We know the dollar amount and the time frames in which all this is going to happen. And what I mean by that is we would get several cards used back to back in a short time frame. So our contacts at ToolCASE, they said, hey, Brian, give us a couple hours, let's work our magic. And literally within a couple hours, between some senior fraud team members here at Redstone and some contacts at ToolCASE, they put together what I call the secret sauce. And it was 2 alerts generated through the real-time fraud analytical software. First alert was looking for a foreign ATM, meaning non-Redstone Federal Credit Union ATM, balance inquiry followed by a withdrawal. Okay, so that was the first alert we put in place. The second alert that my fraud team worked with ToolCASE to create was a frequency rule that said if we get X number of Redstone Federal Credit Union cards used at a foreign ATM, meaning non-Redstone ATM, within a short time frame, we want it to tell us about it, right? So if we can combine those 2 rules, that's going to tell us that somebody is using an abundance of Redstone cards at a foreign ATM. Oh, and they're checking the account balance before they do each one. That's kind of helped us confirm, because look, we had local law enforcement sitting on go, and we didn't want, 8 police officers arriving to a scene and throwing a good member down on the concrete and making a very embarrassing PR nightmare, right? So we wanted to make sure if we have law enforcement respond, we know we got them, the right person, the bad guy. And we got really close. It took us about 2 weeks to get our timing right. It was happening primarily on the weekends. That first weekend, we got within about 20 minutes of having the individual. Boy, that second weekend, though, we had some fraud team members here at Redstone that were literally working overnight. They were staying up all night. And at 10:30, Sam, on a Friday night, I'm working in my shop at the house. I'm listening to music. I'm not at all even thinking about work, to be honest. My cell phone rings. It's my senior fraud analyst, and he's like, Brian, we got them. We got them. They're there right now. And I said, well, have you called our contact at local law enforcement? He said, I have. It's going straight to his voicemail. And I said, well, I'm going to call the sergeant. I called the sergeant, and I think he gave about 3 words when I got him on the phone. I said, Sergeant, we got them. They're there right now. I gave him the address. He said, I'm popping the camera, and he hung up on me. So here it is. I'm 10:30. My analyst is watching through our real-time analytics through ToolCASE. We're watching real-time these transactions hit, right? We have no idea what's going on with law enforcement, other than we know that they now know. Well, then about 20 minutes later, I'm eagerly sitting there by my phone. About 20 minutes later, I get a text. He's running. And then I don't get any more. I don't get any more information. And I'm like on the edge of my seat. I'm calling my fraud contact at the office, and I said, hey, he's running. And then I got the best text message I've gotten all year, and that was, hey, Brian, we've got him. He's hooked up. He's in custody. Oh, and by the way, he had 50 other cards in his pocket. Oh,
Brett,
that's a real-time success story.
It does sound familiar. I mean, I have, I imagine this guy was spending, hour at the ATM, until he felt a little nervous, then he would go on to the next ATM like that. And I've done the exact same thing when I was a criminal. What I would do, he made a few mistakes. And just to tell you what the mistakes are, is he used the same ATMs over and over again. I mean, that's begging for it. Same thing. So, you're begging for it. We know where he's going to be Friday night. Let's just stake that out.
Right. I never claimed he was the smartest guy in the world, but
well, yeah. But you know what? He was stealing a lot of money, and the question comes up: how did he get those cards? That's the question, because you said he had 50 on him. So there's a few ways that criminals get cards like that. I mean, you can go there used to be a website, and the guy named Joker was his screen name. He ran a website called Joker Stash. He actually shut down. Law enforcement didn't catch this guy. He shut down about 5-6 months ago. And when he shut down, he walked away. He walked away with $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion in Bitcoin. Now, what he sold, what he sold, and that's before Bitcoin hit $60,000. All right, Bitcoin was about 17, 18K at this point. Now, what he sold starting out were dumps. So a dump, for those who may not know, a dump is the magnetic information that's on the back of a credit card. So on that magnetic stripe, there are 3 data tracks. First data track is the customer's name. Second data track is the card number. There's an equal sign, then you've got the algorithm outside of that. Third data track is indiscriminate data. No one uses it. So those things sell for roughly, $30 on up to, I've seen them as high as $130. All right. Now that could very well be where the guy got that, and typically that comes from, they could put a skimmer at a gas pump. They put a skimmer wherever they want it to capture that track information that's coming across the line. You can do a man-in-the-middle attack if you've got your networks open and get that information on that as well. So that typically is one of the most popular ways to get card information. And did he get it that way? I don't know. I know that's one way to do it. What you would do is you would look for specific bins. I'm needing bins for Redstone because I'm in the area, and he would want bins that were in his area so he could cash out easier like that. That's one way. Another way, it reminds me of Amex. So about 2 years ago with Amex, they started to see this fraud, and the fraud that was happening was, it started out as a card not present fraud. So what would go on is a criminal would go on the dark web, buy someone's Amex information. They would order, they would commit fraud on that card, buy the MacBook, whatever they want to buy. The card would then be shut down. So the real legitimate customer would report the card as fraud. They'd cancel the card, send out a replacement card. Before the customer got the replacement card, the card had already been hit with fraud. So the question was, what the hell? How is that happening? So the way that was happening is the card issuer, not Amex, mind you, but the card issuer, the algorithm had been broken on that. So it was very easy to determine what the replacement card number was going to be. The CVV, the 3-digit security code on the back, that stayed the same on the replacement. The expiration date was simply the month of the replacement, add 5 years. And fraudsters ate that alive at that point. Now, I spoke to you yesterday on this, and I gave this theory yesterday. Now that you've talked about that, I'm kind of the opinion that it happened through a phishing attack, a man-in-the-middle skimmer attack, something like that. Not a phishing attack, but a skimmer attack, man-in-the-middle attack is what got those card numbers. So what happens is you've got a wholesaler like this Joker Stash, all right? And this guy compiles a load of breached dumps, of breached card numbers. So when he has some buyer, he said the buyer is able to search for a specific BIN, the bank identification number, the first 6 digits of that debit card number. So I'm saying that probably what happened is somewhere there's been a skimmer attack, there's been a man-in-the-middle attack, something like that, that's gotten those numbers. Somebody like Joker Stash has ended up with them. This guy has bought them on the low and has went about trying to defraud everybody. And it sounds like, until he was caught, it sounds like he was somewhat successful. I mean, he was pulling 484 out of pop on that until he gets nabbed.
Yeah, it's high enough that it got the Secret Service's attention just with us. So
I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That is. Now what's even more impressive, and this is that your case is like a poster child of one of the things that I talk about in presentations. And what I talk about is the importance of real-time data. Because say you weren't getting the information that the guy was at the ATM for a couple of hours. He ain't going to be at that ATM anymore. He's going to move on to the next ATM. He may even be home eating his pizza, smoking his joint by that point in time. So
yeah, he would be there about 45 minutes. So if we got that information hours later, it's nice to know. I mean, law enforcement can go request video. They know it happened that day, but you're not gonna get him off the street that day.
You don't get him off the street. And real-time data, that's what really sticks out to me about your story is you saw the guy. The data was coming across the pipeline. You saw the guy in real time. He's hitting us right now. You pick up the phone and call the cops. Hey, the dude is literally there now. Now, dude, why are you drinking? Get up and go get him. That's what you were doing. And the guy's like, what do you mean he's there now? And he's like, he's there now. I'm watching him. He's stealing money right now. So they got him. I can just imagine the guy's sitting there. He's feeding one ATM card in after the other. He sees the blue lights popping. Whoop, whoop. He's like, ah. So he takes off on the run. That's where you got the text message. He's running. But obviously, it's hard to outrun either them dogs or that car. So they got it.
Yeah, they were ready. I've got to give it to local law enforcement. I'm not going to name any names. They know who they are, but they were on it.
Yeah, they were on it.
It's, I suspect that, the criminal element just anticipates that information is not available in real time. I mean, if they know the backbone of the industry, things are working in batch, data's not read in real time. You're either relying on card processors to monitor this information using some type of neural net technology, but they know. This guy had to be pretty surprised.
I mean, I
got a message for him now. Hey, we've got these in place. We know real time. We'll get you.
I mean, that's the thing, right? And Sam's right. I mean, the criminal that I used to be, that guy does not anticipate that type of real-time data. If he knows it's there, I promise you he's going to go to some other target. That's what happens on this. He goes to the lowest hanging fruit, that easiest target. He's not going to be the guy that sits there going, okay, so I can hit this bank, but as soon as I start hitting it, they're going to know I'm there, and whoop, whoop. He's going to look for somebody that's not whoop, whoop, that he can sit there for 45 minutes at an ATM and keep withdrawing. I mean, that's typically what happens. The real-time data changes that game. If you know what you're looking at, and that's the important thing. I mean, you mentioned that yourself. I mean, it's if you know what to look at. The data tells everything. It tells everything that you need. You just need to know what to look at. And ToolCASE was good enough. They were like, give us a couple of minutes. I think we can help you out. And they came in, they knew exactly what to look at, and they hit it hard. The guy, he got arrested. You know, from what you're talking about, Secret Service is in there, so he's going to get charged with aggravated identity, access device fraud, maybe conspiracy, because you said yesterday his girlfriend was in there with him too. So he's looking at, you know, hopefully he gets 4 or 5 years out of that.
Yeah,
Very
one
bad
thing
day
I've
for
not
him.
brought up that's another benefit is this was a huge rapport builder with Redstone and local law enforcement, right? Because
Yeah.
now local law enforcement's like, hey, guess what Redstone's got? Redstone's got real-time fraud detection, real-time fraud alerts. And so it really helped build a bridge there between the financial crimes unit with our local law enforcement, because they know, hey, Brian and his team and over at the Redstone team, they've got some analytics that can help us out. Because I mean, they have a common goal, right? They've got a dozen, 2 dozen, I don't know how many police reports with victims over here looking for them to catch the bad guy, right? They're probably getting called every day by these victims. Hey, have you caught him yet? Have you caught him yet? You know, and it just lets everybody kind of come out looking good in the end from a reputation standpoint.
Well,
I mean,
that's
you're right.
that's a solid point, right? I reading in your bio, preserving safety and soundness of members at the credit union and their assets. Uh, that's a huge missing piece. If you were to ask me from a consumer standpoint, there's a lot of frustration among consumers, dealing with their financial institutions and this ongoing, consistent fraudulent activity. Many times, it's the consumer that's first finding the fraud in their account, then notifying the financial institution. Having to, as you mentioned, go to law enforcement. But the onus shouldn't be on them, right? They didn't necessarily do anything in this situation, but to have that kind of trust and now knowledge that your financial institution is taking those steps, is that progressive and proactive in what they're doing. That's got to give your members a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And it gives some morale building to the team here, because let's face it, when we're dealing with fraudsters all day, every day, hey, we'll take the win, right? And the win is like, when we get that win, it's air, it's just reinforces why we're here.
Well, I mean, that's, I said at the beginning of our show here that Redstone does an outstanding job. And I mean that. I mean that. Now, you talked about an instant here where a criminal came in and he was committing fraud on your system. What I'd like to point out is that fraud happens. You can have these systems in place, but sometimes fraud is still going to happen. Most of the time, I'm talking over 80% of the time, that guy sitting there at that ATM machine is going to get away with that crime, primarily because he's operating in that gap. And when I talk about a gap, what I mean is that data gap. He's operating, he knows there's a certain amount of time that he can commit that crime and go on and not have to worry about getting caught. And that's typically what happens with all forms of cybercrime. Somebody accesses your bank account. They do an account takeover online. They know it's going to be a while before you realize that fraud has happened. And it's at that gap that they can walk in and steal from you. And that's what happens with this guy. The difference was that data. You had real-time data coming through. You were able to notify the cops as the guy's standing there at the ATM and got him caught. That's the difference in this story. And it's not, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and giving that story, because a lot of institutions would not do that. A lot of institutions would say, "Oh no, we don't have fraud. We're not going to talk about those instances where somebody comes in and hits us." No, everybody gets hit. The question is, how do you respond to it? How do you take that proactive response? Because everybody gets hit. So, and the difference is, I'm a big proponent of this. The difference is that data should lead the way. Real-time data leads the way on all this. If you know what you're looking at, the data will tell the tale. And that's one thing I got to say about this story. I mean, you got him caught because of that. ToolCASE came in, they did what they needed to do. You were on the ball. I don't doubt for a second you had guys sitting up all night long saying, "We know we're going to get hit tonight. We're going to catch this SOB tonight." I mean, I
Hey,
know
they get
that was
passionate about it too. Hey, I tell you, that's another difference. You know, I want to give a little plug for credit unions here. We pursue everything. I know a lot of financial institutions, they put a floor in, and I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus, but you know, some financial institutions will not pursue any losses under 5,000 or 10,000. Hey, if you come to Redstone and hit us for $500, we're coming after you, right? And the team gets passionate about it. So it's you know, and yeah, we did have fraud team members up all night.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
that's honestly, that's one of the good things about credit unions, though, right? I mean, a credit union is a smaller institution, and they're able to take a more personable approach to a lot of things. And for anybody out there listening, I don't care. You know, somebody may have the opinion that, well, it's a credit union, they're easier to hit. No, they're not. They're not. It depends on the institution. I'll give you an example. Tesco Bank. Tesco, one of the largest banks on the planet, 2017. They got hit overnight for $2.5 million. There was an exploit that was available, and what it was, this guy on Alpha Bay, it was the largest criminal network on the planet in 2017. This guy on Alpha Bay, he comes in, he makes a post. He's like, "Hey man, I've been able to hit Tesco Bank for $1,000 a week, no flags for the past year." 2 weeks later, Tesco's hit for 2.5. Now that was the largest bank on the planet, and it was because the bank did not pay attention to its customers, did not pay attention to the warnings that were issued to them or anything else. You guys at Redstone are top notch. You're top notch on that. So I cannot overstate that. I mean, it's not, it's
right. You
every
said
financial
something.
institution.
You said
Go
something
ahead,
the
I'm
other
sorry.
day that you know, stuck, and I think, you know, for those folks in the FIs that are listening, um, you know, they're in a tough place, right? We have digital currency and transactions moving at a much faster pace in a very short period of time. When we get to faster payments and FedNow's enacted, it's going down. It's going down from transactions running in batch. You know, no more posting and waiting till after 3 p.m. for you know, for funds to post. You're going to see this stuff happen in seconds. This is
Right.
going to happen quickly, and we're all going to be there across the United States, just like other countries have moved. But you know, in part, you know, FI, especially in this past year, right, with all the changes of in-person transactional activity being limited, banks, financial institutions, credit unions alike, pushed to move to more digital banking means. So you're making the attempt to you know, to stay on top of the customer's demands, stay in front of them with faster and more convenient services. Unfortunately, as I heard you say the other day, they make the convenience of that technology available, but it also makes them more vulnerable, right? So what can FIs do? Look, we're moving in this direction, right? It's coming. We're going down the road. Pretty soon we'll be on faster payment rails. What are some of the things that FIs can do better that they may not be doing today?
Sure. So, you know, it's traditional financial institutions have a leg up on this stuff, and that's credit unions, that's banks as well. And the reason they have a leg up on all these new products and the types of fraud that are coming in and things like that, the reason they have a leg up is because they've seen it for decades. All right, you take a fintech company, they've not really seen that yet. You know, a lot of these fintech companies that come through, they come up with a product or service, and the product or service, man, it's really nice. And then it gets eaten alive with fraud. And the reason why is when you come up with a really nice, easy service to use, criminals will come in and try to exploit that. So what you have to do, and you know, I've worked with a lot of companies. I have, and I've been hard on some of those companies publicly. I don't expect those companies to ever hire me. So, but I've been very hard on some of them.
Hey, thanks for taking
Very
it
hard.
easy on us today.
I mean, very hard. Oh my God. So, but what I'm saying is,
We're
what I'm
going to stay
saying
on your good side.
see, I love you guys. but what I'm saying is that a lot of the times you've got your engineers that come in and they make this service. And of course, the people in the boardroom, they're sitting there going, man, this is going to make us a lot of money. It's going to make a lot of customers happy. We're going to be all right. And then you've got somebody in the fraud department, otherwise known as the no department, because usually somebody in the fraud department, there you go, hand up in the air. Somebody in the fraud department sitting there going, have you even thought about how this thing's going to be used for fraud? And somebody in management saying, shut your mouth. We shouldn't have even invited you to this meeting. So that's the problem. I mean, you have to, just because you come up with that product or service, you have to look and see how fraudsters, how criminals are going to try to exploit it, because they are. They are. I don't care if it's these instant payment services, you know, and you've got a lot of them. I won't call them names right now, but you've got a lot of instant payment services. You mentioned yourself that you were going to have even faster payments on these rails, everything else that are coming out. When you have instances like that, or when you have instances where payments can't be reversed or something like that, it becomes extremely lucrative for criminals, because they know if they can get somebody to send the funds, that they've made money at that point in time. So it's more than just involving engineers. It's more than just involving management and your CEO that's happy because stock price is going to go through the roof and he's going to be able to retire early. You have to look at the fraud aspect of it. You have to talk to your fraud team. Your fraud team knows what's going on. I promise you they do. They've seen this stuff. Just listen to them. That's the issue. Listen to them. It's when you sit there and say, nah, we'll be all right. We'll be all right. That's when you get somebody like Brett Johnson that complains about them a lot. And I complain about some a lot.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. And I can remember being in those meetings, but taking, having the willingness to take a holistic approach to what you're doing, and incorporating, the fraud loss mitigation folks into the equation, just to see how you're backed up, because you may not have the technology that you're using, and if there's a gap, like you mentioned, the bad guys are going to know that the gap's there. They're going to bet on that gap. That's how they're planning their strategy.
I mean, if you leave that door, they're going to hit it.
I was going to say, from my perspective, I got to brag on my leadership. The leadership at Redstone is so supportive of these fraud mitigation tools and resources. And you hit on it, Brett. Not every financial institution wants to put money towards that, right? It's kind of tough to prove ROI on some of this stuff. Now, of course,
it is.
It's not in ToolCASE. I can say, hey, we just saved X because we shut this down. But yeah, a lot of people don't want to put that cost out there. But we're blessed here in North Alabama.
It's most companies. Most companies will not consider the cost of cybersecurity and put the money out for it until they're hit. I was talking to a lady yesterday, and she's like, I want your input on this ransomware. And she's like, I want your specific input on that. And my input was, hey, the point is that she had mentioned she was on a panel, and the conversation turned into, somebody had said, well, it's whether you pay ransom, it boils down to a business decision. And I was like, no, the only business decision is on the criminal's part. Once he gets paid, the decision is to keep going because it's profitable for him. If it's a business decision on the company who's been hit with ransomware, that tells me that they never considered cybersecurity at all until they were hit. And now they have to pay some ransom to get their data back. If they took a proactive response to begin with, it wouldn't be a business decision. It'd be like, no, we're not hit to begin with. We're not paying the ransom. But that's typically what happens. You don't worry, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals don't worry about cybersecurity until they're victimized. And we have to change that. We've got to change that. You guys over there, I mean, you guys are doing great. You signed up with the right companies. You've got, as you mentioned just a second ago, you've got management that does exactly what they need to do about listening to the people that are working there instead of deciding they know what's best. And I'm sure they do, but still, it's good to listen to your employees and your people who are experts that you've hired for that stuff.
That's good stuff. For those FIs that are listening, the takeaways that I'm coming up with is that you need to take fraud into consideration and the loss mitigation risks that the company, any kind of advancement with product or service that you're looking to roll out. Talk to your fraud team, bring them in, consult with them. and investigate what they're using in technology and tools. If there's if they're seeing a gap, and Brett, as you had mentioned, they know it's there. They've been dealing with it. Talk to them about what that gap is. Explore the opportunities in the industry. Of course, anybody listening, you're welcome to reach out to ToolCASE at toolcase.com and get more information on our products, services. But I want to thank Brian Smith for taking time, sharing, doing great things over there, Brian. Certainly appreciate your time and willingness to share with us today. Okay, if I let folks know that if you want to reach Brian, you can probably go to their website, hit the contact section for info@redfcu.org, and I'm sure they can get to you with more information. My co-host and friend, Brett Johnson, pleasure, anglerfish.com. Check him out. Gentlemen, look forward to the next discussion.
Sam, Brian, you take care, man. I'll be up there to see you soon.
All right. Come on. Thanks a lot, y'all.
Talk soon.
Learn more about the ToolCASE suite of real-time AI products and how to protect your institution from fraud today.